Hello and welcome to the Wednesday edition of the Unpaid Interns. It is Wednesday, July 1st. Austin Ritter with Tamar Share. Tamar, great to have you back. How have you been?
Doing great. There's stuff to talk about in sports, which is fun, and just really happy to be back. Excited. A lot's going on, especially in the NFL right now, which we're going to get to, but I'm going to give it away to you first.
I think we're about to head into one of the best sporting months of our lives. And as weird as it's going to be, and hopefully everything stays to schedule, which we're going to talk about here in a moment, but I mean, you're looking at the MLB, the NHL, the NBA all getting started, the MLS getting started. The soccer leagues across the pond are already going, golf is going, NASCAR's going. You've got just so much happening here in the month of July. It's going to be pretty crazy toward the end of this month. But I'll start with this, I guess, since we're on this topic. Adam Silver, an article on ESPN yesterday. Uh, Adam Silver is still optimistic, but he is certainly starting to think about all these cases. From the article, NBA Commissioner Adam Silver remains, quote, pretty confident about the league's plan to safely resume play, but admits that a spread in the NBA community could bring the league to a halt again. So I think it's certainly you can't be naive. I mean, Florida is having one of the worst outbreaks right now in the country. So I think if you're Adam Silver, you can't pretend that's not happening. You have to hope that the bubble that you are putting your players and your coaches and your teams into is going to be enough to keep them safe.
Right. And you look at the Denver Nuggets, they closed their practice facility because at least three of their 35 team traveling party that were going to Orlando tested positive. So clearly, this is still an issue. It's still going on. We're still in a pandemic and still talking about the fact that there is potentially and probably going to be a second wave coming in the fall. So I think a lot of people in the sports world and not are really starting to lessen the restrictions that they're putting and not taking those safety protocols. But what's so important is to continue on that track. And even with the MLB, they have made a ton of safety protocols and regulations in order to get that season up, because that's been the discussion all summer is getting some sport normalcy back. And you can't have that without the safety protocols. So NBA in particular, Adam Silver, yes, optimistic. He says Orlando is going to be a place where hopefully those safety protocols are really being followed. So it's going to be safer there than anywhere else. But how do you keep the players in, and how do you make sure that they maintain that level of safety?
That'll be the big question for the NBA and for all the other sports that are attempting to go. And I think if you have an answer tomorrow, they might want it from you. If you could help out the commissioners in some way, shape, or form here, I'm sure they'd
My
appreciate
wisdom,
it.
I will try. I will.
Do you have Adam Silver's number? You can just give him a holler.
Unfortunately not.
Uh,
Maybe our next guest, Mike, does. We don't know, but
well, maybe we'll just get Adam Silver on this show. So a couple other small headlines. Cam Newton, not small, but Cam Newton is a Patriot, which is a pretty big headline. It's small in the sense of there's not a whole lot to talk about right now because we don't really know. I mean, the sports world is so dead right now that talk shows are spending hours just trying to predict how Cam Newton's going to play. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and ask you how Cam Newton's going to play, but this is a big deal. I mean, the Patriots kind of launched themselves back into the conversation.
right. Everyone's saying that adding Cam changes the odds for the Patriots and puts them on top. And not that they weren't going to be on top, but everyone was saying this is going to be the year for the Bills. This is going to be the year for them to come up in the AFC East. The Patriots are going to fall off a bit without that superstar quarterback. But now they have Cam Newton. It looks like the Patriots can't really get away from an MVP quarterback. I don't know, but what do you think? What kind of position do you think that's going to put the Bills in? That's the big conversation.
It's going to make it tougher for the Bills. I kind of thought it might be not a walk in the park, but the Bills were certainly the heavy favorites in what in my opinion, was always one of the worst divisions in football outside of the Patriots. And now it was going to be even worse. And who knows? Cam Newton could be a bust. He's been a bust for the past few years because of injuries, because of inaccuracy. Ever since his MVP season, he has not done much. So he could be an absolute bust in New England. And of course, as I talked about on Monday, Belichick signs this incentive laden deal that if it doesn't work out, the Patriots still benefit. So leave it up to Bill Belichick to sign that. Other news, the MLB and the MILB, they have canceled minor league baseball, which is a huge blow. I live in a city that it surrounds its minor league baseball team, the ballpark right in the middle of downtown, the Fort Wayne Tin Caps. It will not be the same this summer. Every time I've driven by the stadium, they have like their little graphic board, and creative media people there. They put up days until opening day, and it's just a bunch of shrug emojis, which is so sad. But
That
now we
sucks.
know that there will be no opening day. There will be no minor league baseball, and these guys don't get paid a lot to begin with. There could be a decent amount of people that have to give up their passion and their sport because they just can't make ends meet without a season.
One option I'm sure you've seen is that the Nashville AAA team wants to start a two-team league of free agents. That's an option to get some play, and then in hopes of getting noticed or maybe picked up. But it sucks. It really does. It puts things into perspective, obviously. And now it was the hope for so long. Okay, there's a glimmer of hope because the NBA, but also MLB is starting again. And then it just kind of all crashes down, and it really puts it into perspective of this is the reality of today. It's unprecedented. So many times of we don't know what to do. So many events happening. So it's difficult. I'm sure it's hard for your city as well, but just it sucks for those minor league players.
We love our minor league baseball here in Fort Wayne. Let me tell you, it's a huge hit in the summer, especially as we approach 4th of July. They always have a great spectacle. Um, Unfortunately, that will not be the case. In other news in the MLB, we'll just hit a couple rapid fire here before we bring in our first guest. MLB teams can't ID players who test positive, which is going to be an interesting thing. I'm a big golf fan, and that was one of the things that we thought we'd have in golf. A player with WD, but he wouldn't have to say the tour wouldn't say this guy tested positive. It would be up to that player. I'm curious if that'll be the case with the MLB, if somebody tests positive, if they can say it, because contact tracing is so important that it feels like they will need to know kind of who tested positive, where they've been, who they've been in contact with. The NHL focusing on Canada for hub cities, plural. So could be just a hockey league in Canada. I know Vegas, and when we had Scott Powers on, he was talking Chicago, but things have spiked a little bit in that city since he was on. Be interesting. Just throwing everybody up in Canada. And finally, Zion Williamson, and you can have your takes on this, but Zion Williamson named one of 3 NBA 2K21 cover athletes, and he hasn't even completed a full NBA season. So, as you could tell in the tone of my voice, it's not my favorite decision, but he is a money grabber. He is an attention grabber, and it's not surprising that the NBA trying to capitalize on that. Those are today's headlines. Tomorrow now, it is time to bring in our first guest. Later today, we'll have Jack Grossman, but right now, tomorrow, we have a great special guest with us today.
Yes, we have fellow St. Louisan Mike Proctor, a great family friend of mine, and also now the new owner of the NBL Hawks basketball team. Mike, how are you? What's up?
Doing great, Austin, Tamar. Thank you for having me. Look forward to spending some time with you guys.
Tamar continues to bring in all the St. Louis. I think we're going to have the entire city of St. Louis on here by the end of the summer.
That's a good thing. That's a good thing.
Hey, we're a great sports city, no matter what anyone says. So we're bringing in a lot. But Mike, so this is now, I believe, week 2 since you announced your new ownership of the Illawarra Hawks, which is now the Hawks, if I'm not mistaken. So can you
Correct.
tell me what went into your decision of getting that team? And then why is this a good spot for you right now?
Yeah, well, ownership has always been a dream of mine. Being involved with basketball at every level is something that I've always enjoyed. And I have a teammate from college, Brian Colangelo. He and I were teammates 34 years ago, and he has vast basketball pedigree. His father, Jerry Colangelo, was the famed owner of the Phoenix Suns. Brian worked for Phoenix and then Toronto as the president, and then the president of the Philadelphia 76ers. And I think one of Brian's talents when he was in the NBA was finding and developing international talent. Did an exceptional job of that, particularly with the Raptors. From that, he had extensive contacts and became friends with a person named Dori Kahidi, who's an Australian who actually played professional basketball in Israel. And he and Dori kicked it around a little bit because the Hawks were available. Dori had been involved with the NBL on a league level. So it kind of made sense with Dori's knowledge of the NBA, Brian's vast knowledge of basketball at all professional ranks, that those two guys teamed together. After doing so, Brian called me and said, "Hey, what do you think? Here's the deal. Do you have interest?" And it took me about 5 seconds to say yes. And now we're digging in and trying to get it done.
Fabulous. That's just great. And you're living your dream, living your truth, getting into the ownership. And so you've always had a passion for basketball, clearly. What role as an American are you going to play into this league's, I think, improving of the fan base and just really working to help the team?
Yeah,
well?
so one of the unique things that the NBL has done is something called the Next Stars program. Terrence Ferguson with the Oklahoma Thunder was the first player to do this rather successfully. Now, when Terrence played in the NBL, he didn't really get a lot of playing time, but he developed. He was able then to transcend that into a pretty decent G League year, but the maturation process that he went through was exceptional. And now he is, a starter in the NBA on a very, very high quality team. Following that, of course, this past year, they had RJ Hampton and LaMelo Ball. And the Next Stars program has just been a huge success for them. And quite frankly, maybe one of the reasons why Adam Silver felt the need to have the G League go after high school seniors in the likes of Jalen Hill and others to bring them directly to the NBA umbrella and keep them from going maybe to Australia. So I've been involved with the AAU circuit for a while. I think I have a pretty good knowledge of the top tier teams. From that, you speak to a lot of individuals that really have a good grasp on talent. So hopefully I can help the Hawks in that regard. We are allowed 2 imports in addition to a Next Star player for the season. So Brian and I are kind of scouring the landscape right now to see if we can bring in maybe a nice point guard and a nice swing, a nice 3-man to our lineup and help us win some ball games.
Well, Tamar mentioned it at the top. You are kind of stripping the name down to just the Hawks. What's kind of the reasoning behind that? Was that before you, or what's the point to stripping it down to a simple Hawks?
Yeah, so Illawarra is part of Wollongong. It's about an hour south of Sydney. It's a beautiful city, right on the beach, right on the water. And in fact, it's often called Malibu, where Sydney's called LA. It's home of a lot of indigenous people, a lot of pride with these people. But the league felt, and it was a league decision. Quite frankly, we did not know until the ownership group had been announced formally. It was a league decision, primarily because we don't play all of our games in Illawarra. We play some in Cranberry and Canberra, and maybe even more locations. So we're going to kind of be like the Cardinals are. We're going to be a regional team, whereas we're not specific to one city. Hence the Hawks versus the Illawarra Hawks.
Beautiful. And
makes sense.
it does make sense. We were having a little debate beforehand. We didn't exactly know why. You answered it for us. Moving also to a little more of a broad spectrum, what's being talked about in the NBL right now, especially with what's going on in our world today? The pandemic is still a thing. So what are those conversations looking like?
Well, unfortunately, the United States hasn't done as well controlling this pandemic as other countries. We've seen Europe drop off dramatically. Spain, Italy have stabilized. But Australia and in particular New Zealand has not had an issue at all. When I say not at all, very, very little. Australia has 20 million citizens, and currently there's a little outbreak in Melbourne of 63 people. But prior to that, I think about a month ago, there were actually only 3 people in the entire country that had COVID. They have a very, very strict way of arming themselves against this pandemic. You have to do a mandatory 14-day quarantine in an armed hotel. So, there's no one coming into the country with the disease because they're not going to get out of the hotel. And that is advantageous for us as a league, because we feel that there's a strong likelihood that we are going to play our games, and we probably will play our games in front of fans. And we think that that will be intriguing to players right now in many countries that aren't quite sure, one, if they're going to play, and certainly if they play, most likely will not be in front of fans.
And what do you think it's going to be like for the fan base? Do you think that's going to help improve and take it more to the United States, where we're not quite sure what's going to happen with the NBA? Do you think there's going to be a greater amount of people following those NBL teams?
I think it's possible, right? I mean, if the NBA and MLB, much like you guys discussed at the beginning of your show, if the 3 major sports are playing on ESPN and they're televised, I don't think there's going to be that much of a TV demand per the United States on the NBL level. But if in fact we're one of the only shows, on the TV, then I think we have a chance of really garnering some tremendous, respect and notoriety around the league, which will only, in fact, improve play as we go along and grow. So it's exciting. It really is.
You mentioned RJ Hampton and LaMelo Ball that you've had there for the past year. Where do you see those guys, or I guess what impact did they make, and where do you see them going in an NBA draft?
Well, LaMelo got hurt. LaMelo didn't play many games with the Hawks last year. However, the ones he did play, he was highly productive. I think he had 2 or 3 games in a row with double-doubles, and just so happened to do that and capture the NBA's attention. From that, he automatically kind of became a top 5 pick minimum, maybe top 3 pick, if not number 1. Then he unfortunately got hurt and kind of had to shut it down. RJ did not play as much as LaMelo. But from everything that I've heard, he played well when he had the opportunity, and most likely increased his draft stock too. So really it's a beautiful thing if in fact the next star maybe can go to the United States, to Australia from the United States, and really showcase themselves to the NBA scouts against grown men in a highly competitive league and move up dramatically in the draft. It'll be interesting to see how this year plays out, because we really don't know, unfortunately, what's going to happen with college basketball this year.
Do you feel
And
like there's going to be a relationship as AAU is to college basketball, the NBL could be to the NBA? You think it's going to become more of a common route for people to maybe see the success of some people in the NBL and start going there?
Oh, I think you're onto something. Absolutely. I think that we will definitely be an option. I would predict that the NBA will increase the amount of players going from college to the G League. I think they'll find more ways to pay some of those talents more money. But I do think that we'll get our fair share. College isn't for everyone, and it's just a great platform. I like to look at it, maybe the NBA will take top 10 talents, and maybe we get top 20, top 25 talents. And maybe they can utilize our league as a means to maybe break into the lottery, which is incredibly advantageous to them financially.
fantastic. You're on a roll, really. It's great to see you coming into a place where you've always wanted to be. And speaking to your love of basketball, you already spoke of this before. Brian was a teammate of yours at Cornell, correct?
Correct.
So where'd your love of basketball really stem from? Why
First of all,
do you love it?
I want to tell you that Cornell actually had some IU roots. The coach that recruited us was Coach Tom Miller, who was Bobby Knight's longtime assistant, who actually recruited Isaiah and was a part of some of those amazing Hoosier teams. Unfortunately, I didn't get a chance to play for Coach Miller. He left and went to Colorado when I was a freshman, and Brian was a senior. But no, I grew up in Naperville, Illinois, and played basketball there. A good friend of mine in Naperville was Porter Mosier, the coach of Loyola. He and I were kind of rivals and went toe to toe. But that's where it started. And then, obviously grew at Cornell and so forth.
And then it runs in your family too. You have Dominic, your son, who was a walk-on at Miami, and he grew up. I believe you coached him a bit, or you were that father figure to help kind of instill that basketball love in him. So just how is it being still so connected to the game?
Yeah, no, it was fun. I coached him through 8th grade, and then I had to hand him off to the AAU circuit. He was fortunate at AAU. He played at MoCan in the same organization with Trey Young and Michael Porter, Shake Milton. Just a fabulous, fabulous AAU program. Definitely a top 2, along with maybe Team Takeover out of DC. And then we moved to Las Vegas, where he played high school basketball at Bishop Gorman for 2 years with Zach Collins. Was able to play on the Las Vegas Prospects, which is part of the EYBL circuit, was back then, and was able to play with Troy Brown and Chuck O'Bannon Jr. and O'Shea Brissett, who's now on the Raptors. So I was able to, through Dominic, I was able to see and engage a lot of those superior talents. And maybe we'll get some of them out to Australia. We'll see.
Well, it feels like there could be a bit of, you could see it as competition between the NBL and the G League and where people want to go. How does having Brian with you kind of help you know how the NBA operates, how they're looking at things, and does he help you kind of create that sales pitch for somebody to come to the NBL?
Yeah, I would say that Brian has amazed me with his agent contacts. There's just not an agent that exists that has any stable of clients that Brian doesn't have in his phone. And because of that, unfortunately, we've been able to field a lot of calls on those guys in the G League that are still trying to fight maybe for an NBA opportunity. And then maybe if in fact they realize that opportunity is not going to come, they have to decide, do I want to stick with the G League or maybe venture off to Australia? So we're going to try to get the 2 best imports we can, but there's just no doubt that Brian's knowledge of the landscape of sports agents with basketball is just vast and impressive.
And where does your guys' friendship? I know it started at Cornell, but what has that been like, kind of being friends with someone like a Colangelo who's been through so much with his father and himself?
Yeah, it's pretty neat. While we were in Las Vegas, we would go to Pac-12 tournaments and sit with Jerry and get his perspective and watch him watch the game while he's got his cell phone watching a Duke game. Just a basketball mastermind. So it's been incredibly fruitful for me just to be able to meet a Jerry Colangelo and pick his brain on occasion.
And if
Is
things
this,
are
yeah.
if things are scheduled to go and you get everything like you've said it, you're hopeful for, what's kind of the first step in your ownership and your first big thing that you want to get accomplished with the Hawks?
We have a great coach. We have a 6-time NBL championship coach in Brian Gorgon. And I think that was the first step in showing the communities that we're serious about winning some ball games. The team last year only won 5, and that's just unacceptable. So first goal is to give Coach Gorgon all of the talent we can amass, pay them fairly, and show the communities that we're going to put a good brand of basketball on the court and win some ball games and have a lot of fun in that process.
I was just going to speak as well too. Sorry for cutting you off, Austin.
Oh,
I was going to speak to, what is the goal for you? Is this what you've always dreamed of, being an owner of an NBL team, or where do you see, what kind of piggybacking on what Austin was saying, where do you see this going in your future and also NBL future?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think the NBL is growing dramatically, and that growth is awfully it's organic, and it's a great thing to see, and that's why we're so happy to be a part of it. So again, I think our goal is to make the Hawks the premier team in the league. There's only 9 of us, and if we can do that and have a lot of success, then we're well on our way towards other things that maybe we can't predict right now. So there's just a lot of changing of ownership and teams and so forth, particularly with the COVID situation that the world is facing. It's thrown things up in a quandary, and we'll see if we can take advantage of maybe some opportunities down the road.
Well, Mike, I'll finish on this. Do you still have the basketball game? How is it? Can you hang around with Dominic? Can you hang around with your players at all?
I can still shoot it a bit, but the eyesight's not as good as it once was. So, what I think is going in often doesn't. But outside of maybe shooting some free throws, I'm done.
That's fair. Well, at least you can still shoot it around a little bit. But thanks so much for spending some time with us today. Best of luck to you and the NBL here in your upcoming weeks, and wish you the best of luck this season.
I appreciate you guys having me. You guys do a terrific job, and I root for the Hoosiers. So good luck this season in football and basketball.
Thank
Mike.
you. So good seeing you.
Bye-bye.
That was Mike Proctor of the Hawks from the NBL, the newly stripped down to a simple name, Hawks. We're going to bring in our next guest here. He is the radio personality and producer for ESPN 680, 939 The Ville. But more importantly, he's a good friend of ours, folks. It is Jack Grossman. Jack, how are you?
Thanks for having me on, guys. Big shoes to fill after Michael there. That I feel humbled and honored a little bit to be on. Thanks for having me on, guys.
Absolutely. We're just happy to have you. Like I said, we're going to have you on at some point. Thank you for stepping in the last minute scenario. But so we wanted to have a couple of people on who are facing one of the most unique perspectives in the fact that you graduated in the middle of a global pandemic. I know,
Yeah.
congratulations, you have a job, but like what has this been like, and what were the first couple of months like? I know you started with online school, then you go into a job hunt. Just kind of tell people what it's like to graduate in a pandemic.
Well, for me, it's weird to say, I was very lucky and fortunate that I had a place in ESPN Louisville that I'd interned with for a couple summers, done part-time board hopping last summer and over winter break whenever I'm home, basically. So I was fortunate in that I kind of had a path to where I had an option to actually get a job, even though even up to this point, most of the stuff that I'm going to be doing hasn't started yet due to the pandemic. Like, we're just getting to the point now to where I'm in the office at least at the station at least 2 to 3 times a week, either producing weekly shows, or for a while I was board hopping Westwood One, where Westwood One affiliate also was rebroadcasting old March Madness and old NFL games. So that would basically be my only job, go in and board up a game that was 30 years old. So not the most entertaining stuff in the world, but made a little bit of money. I feel fortunate I do have a job that I am, hopefully, if football does happen, have stuff to keep me busy, give me something to do. Because other than that, I've just kind of patiently been sitting and waiting and bored just like everyone else. So it's been frustrating at times. It's been long at times, but I feel very lucky that I have at least something to look forward to down the road.
How prepared did you feel coming from a program like Indiana's and then going straight into a job? Yeah, it was boring at first, but you're still there. You made it, and you're only going to continue to keep growing. So what did that process look like, and how prepared do you really feel?
I feel pretty prepared. I mean, Galen did obviously a phenomenal job, as he does with everyone, giving me the opportunity to do a lot of hands-on learning through podcasting, through WIUX radio shows when I was younger at IU, and just getting so many different experiences in so many different mediums, to where, like, I'm creating a podcast and I'm gonna have to create a podcast logo. So I got to use Photoshop for that. That's something I probably wouldn't have been able to do a couple of years ago. And I'm going to be covering games for them, Kentucky games actually, which is kind of ironic for me, but but I'm looking forward to that, and that's something that I wouldn't feel as comfortable doing if I hadn't been covering IU football and basketball for the IDS and IUS TV. So I've been prepared a lot of ways by IU, by the program. The production board that Studio 8 has is pretty similar to what we have at the station here. So it's made the transition a lot easier for me. It does help that I had been there before, so like I knew how to work their production board. I knew kind of how their systems work, but it gives me more confidence when I'll actually be doing the work that I will eventually be able to start doing once the fall comes, as long as there's football.
Well, it feels like forever ago, and you were a part of the student media that was at the final full basketball game of 2020, or at least of this season. That was IU Nebraska, Bankers Life Fieldhouse, March 11th. What do you remember from that night? One of the weirdest nights, one of the strangest nights. What stands out to you, and what kind of take us through what it was like to be there?
Well, I'm still mad at Fred Hoiberg, first of all. One of the dumbest things you could ever do, what Fred Hoiberg did that night, but that's kind of beside the point at this stage. It's a night that I'll definitely never forget, and I was just happy to be there and be some part of it. Just being able to cover it, be on the broadcast, and just really not really knowing how to react to what seemed like the 15 different times Austin popped in Connor Hines' in I's ear and said, hey, Rudy Gobert tested positive. Hey, the NBA suspended their season. Hey, everything's just basically done. And having to
react. I can confirm that did happen a lot.
Yes.
I was just refreshing Twitter. I stayed home to study for a test, and I couldn't study because there was too much going on. But that test never happened, by the way. It got canceled.
Of course it did.
Yeah.
Of course it got canceled. Everything got canceled, but just the surreal experience of how quickly everything escalated. Because before the game, the Big Ten announces that there aren't going to be fans the rest of the tournament, but they're still going to play the tournament. So when they made the announcement, it wasn't a huge crowd, but like the 10, 15,000 people there, they booed the heck out of the PA guy, and they weren't happy with the decision. Then in the middle of the first half, Gobert tests positive, and they pulled the Thunder and the Jazz off the court. Austin tells us, and we're reacting to it, but we're not really sure what's going on. We're kind of like, okay, are they going to keep playing? We kind of, because I remember we had the discussion at halftime, Connor and I, kind of assuming they would just keep playing without fans. And then Ari Schiffon, who does some work for Inside the Hall and Assembly Call, is sitting there telling us they're going to cancel everything out tonight. Everything's going to be done. And we kind of thought he was crazy, to be frank, at the point. Look how wrong we were. But there it comes. First media timeout of the second half. Austin has an in-studio update, and he says, well, the NBA is suspending their season after tonight. It was like, well, bleep hit the fan. What the heck are we going to do? And the basketball game just became completely secondary by that point. Because, IU was up big most of the game, other than that one run late in the first half Nebraska had. And so that kind of wasn't the story anymore. The story was the coronavirus, especially when it was reported that Fred Hoiberg was really bleeping sick. Because, like, oh my God, this guy might have the virus, and there's all these thousands of people here, including ourselves. What the hell are we going to do? They quarantined the Nebraska team after the game. IU rushed straight to the hotel. They got the heck out of there as quickly as they could. It was really just, it was a surreal night that I'll never forget. I'm happy, as weird as it sounds, I'm happy that I got to be a part of it, and that I'm happy that, not that it happened, but that I'll be able to look back and say, yeah, I was there and witnessed it.
It was
Right.
a weird night. And that was the most active I've ever been as a studio host. Normally it's just I push a couple buttons, put you guys on the air, and watch something on my computer. But or don't tell the bosses at WX that. But yeah, that was
we've all been there.
That was a busy night. Let's kind of shift to college sports as a whole. You're one of the most knowledgeable and biggest college sports fans that I know. I mean, just take a look at his wall behind him, folks. If you're listening to the podcast version of this, he just has IU and Louisville stuff all over his wall. What do you think the future holds? I mean, obviously none of us have the answers right now, but from what you've taken in, say, in the past month since athletics were allowed to return to campus, which, man, that's crazy that was a month ago. What have you taken away from all of the news that's come out?
I don't know if it's the right thing or not, but for me, it seems like they're going to at least try to play. Because I think there's been kind of a conscious statement, not just within college sports, but with the NBA, not gonna say MLB because they're a whole other mess, but all these other professional sports leagues, to where they're kind of saying, we don't really care anymore if someone tests positive. We got to make sure we make our money, get to the bottom line. I don't know if that's the right thing to say or for them to do. It may be a little bit cynical on my part, but that just seems to me kind of where college sports and professional sports even are at this point, which for pro sports, it makes more sense because, they are paid athletes. It is their job. For the college athletes, it's a more complex question because they are technically student athletes. That's what the NCAA says they are. That's why they don't pay them. So they're kind of trying to play both sides of the line here, to where they're saying, yes, the student comes first, safety, all that stuff. But then they're like, yeah, we'll go ahead and let you risk and see if you get the virus, or, all the other normal injuries you can get playing, especially, football or basketball, 2 contact sports. So it's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out. I do think they're going to try to play, which, while I'm not sure if it's the right thing to do, is good for me considering I need that for a job. but it's going to be very interesting to see how it plays out. I do think football does have a better chance right now, and not that I have like anything scientific or mathematical to prove that, but because it is an outside sport, because the virus does seem to travel less when it's outside, and because you can at least get a chunk of that season in before it really gets cold out again in the so-called second wave, whatever they're calling it these days ends up coming. Basketball, even though there's less people, it does worry me a little bit just from the standpoint of it's inside and it's in the dead of winter. And I don't know where the heck the virus will be at that point. We don't know where the heck the virus will be tomorrow. So it's hard to project like 5-6 months down the road. But for me, while everyone just seems to kind of feel like, okay, basketball's going to go on as normal, I do worry about that from the standpoint of I don't know when a vaccine's going to come, or even if it does come, how quickly it'll be widespread. So it's very murky right now. I can't really provide anything clear, obviously. It's just very much in a wait and see mode and kind of proceed hoping that things are going not return to normal, but we'll be able to play in some sort, and then just kind of holding out hope, I guess.
Now you're no longer a student at IU, so you can let your fandom show a bit. But what are your expectations for IU football and basketball if it is a go and they can play in some sense?
You know, it's so weird. I don't know how to handle feeling completely 100% optimistic about IU football. Like I really think they can win 9-10 games this year, which is something that, yeah, no, I mean that
I am clipping that and tweeting that immediately.
Go ahead. I mean, if there was ever a year to have to go to Wisconsin, to Michigan, and to Ohio State, it would be the year that there can't be any fans or limited fans in the stadium. Which, as weird as it sounds, limited fans helps IU football in so many ways. because
they're used to playing in front of limited fans.
There's that. There's the fact that they play those 3 road games where there's normally 100,000 plus people in the stadiums. Heck, even, the Penn State game at home, the fact there won't be any Penn State fans will help them. I mean, we know the old joke every time they take the full aerial pictures when Ohio State comes to town, just everyone's red, you can't see it. So I really do think if Michael Penix can stay healthy, if Nick Sheridan can make the transition from OC from DeBoer to him pretty seamless, then I think bottom line would be 8 wins, because I do think they should win the 8 games on their schedule that isn't Penn State, Wisconsin, then Ohio State, Michigan. And I really think they could get Penn State this year at home on Halloween. I mean, I think that's a good formula for them. Wisconsin's going to be interesting on the road because they are replacing Jonathan Taylor. They are replacing a lot of their defense. So if there's ever a time to get Wisconsin, it would be then. However, I'm not going to pick them to do that because, this is IU football. I do think they get one of those 2. I'd lean towards Penn State. And I think I'd have them going 9-3 in the regular season. Do you think Purdue at the end could be a little bit interesting? I think they'll have a bounce back year since they'll have Bell as a sophomore, Rondell Moore back. Maybe they won't be crippled by injuries, and it's always a big if to say IU football will win all the games they're supposed to. But I do think if Penix can stay healthy and the OC transition works out, they could very well win 9 games, maybe even 10.
I don't think people, and I think we do because we're media people and we study it, but the normal fan may not realize the talent that is in Penix's arm because we've only seen him for like 3 full games. But you see these statistics that are tweeted out by PFF and all these other organizations that are like top against this zone or top arm strength or Heisman favorites, and he's like 25th. Like, just for IU to have someone who's 25th is insane. Like, it feels like the common fan doesn't know, and it's not their fault, but they don't know that guy is supremely talented. And I've always said it, and I know you're good. I think you'll agree with me, Jack. This offseason was bigger for him because he wasn't dealing with a torn ACL, so he was able to bulk up a little bit.
It'll be interesting to see how the pandemic affected his offseason, because this was going to be a very important offseason, because one of the things you can fall back on is like, well, he always got hurt last year because, as you said, he was coming off the torn ACL. He didn't have that normal offseason between your freshman and sophomore year, or for him, redshirt to redshirt freshman year, to really build up that body, muscle mass, and be physically ready to play Big Ten football. That's what this offseason was supposed to be. But with the pandemic, getting back to Bloomington got delayed. IU's been lucky to this point. They haven't had any positive tests, but we don't know if that'll last. As if it'll be very important for him to be able, as you said, Austin, be able to get physically ready. But other than Penix, I mean, they bring back virtually everyone. I mean, yes, they lose Westbrook and Donovan Hale, but you bring back Watt Villier, you bring back Ty Freifogel, David Ellis is supposed to take on a bigger role, Stevie Scott in the backfield, and really, you have a lot of pieces there. If you can get the O-line figured out and the defensive line, win that battle in the trenches, God, that sounds cliche, then that's really where you can have a really special season for them.
What about IU basketball? What about basketball with Trace Jackson Davis?
We're teeing you up right now.
You guys know I'm still skeptical of Archie a little bit. This will be probably the most. He doesn't have the same 1-2 punch he had with Romeo and Juwan a couple years ago. This will probably be the deepest talent pool he's had since he's been at IU. I absolutely love Trace Jackson Davis. It was huge that they were able to get him back for the obvious reasons. He should be a first-team All-Big Ten player, dominant. I want to see if he can stretch out that jumper a little bit, try to spread the floor, even if it's not threes, hit some free throw line mid-range jumpers, help him out. Christian Lander is going to be interesting. I'm very intrigued on how Archie's going to use Lander, if he'll start him next to Rob Fantasy and maybe go a little bit smaller, Al Durham at the 3 or Jerome Hunter at the 3 and use Al Durham as a 6-man type, or if he'll try to bring Lander off the bench, because Indiana's going to need guys that create their own shot off the dribble. There's not really too many on the roster that can do that. And I think that's where Lander becomes a big X factor. If he can come in, play big minutes, and create his own shot when, let's face it, teams are going to be packing it in again against the IU offense, because Al Durham's a better shooter, but he isn't going to scare or terrify a lot of people. Jerome Hunter was over 40% from 3 in Big Ten play, but people are going to want to see a higher sample size. Other than that, and Rob Fantasy, who's a low-volume shooter, who's really going to be hitting outside shots for this team? That's where you need a guy like Trace Jackson Davis to step up, or Race Thompson to shoot more than 10 threes, and more importantly, make more than 3 of them. So it's going to be another battle of, can Indiana find ways to score when teams pack it in on them? And I think that's where Lander will become absolutely huge, because he's the guy that can break down the defense and try to get some scoring opportunities one-on-one off the dribble.
Was it unfair may not be the right word, but was it an unfortunate break for Archie? Because I agree, he hasn't quite proven himself, but he might have had his chance. I mean, you take a team to March, anything can happen. He could make that moment that the fans are like, okay, this is our guy. Was it unfortunate for Archie? Is he getting a bad rap because he didn't get that opportunity with a team that was definitely going?
Yeah, I'd say it's unfortunate. I'd absolutely say it's unfair too, because they were going to be a 10 seed. I mean, Lenardi had him as an 11, but I was looking at it yesterday. He had him as an 11, but didn't even have him in the last 4 buys. So that's just that's a little slight from the Archie comments from back in late February, early March. That was the Oscar the Grouch, phenomenal, favorite moment. but I do think that is absolutely unfair. I don't think IU would have done much in the tournament, but just to say, they made the tournament. They got over that hump. They got there. Would have been huge for the program. Because right now, looking at this year, I think there'll be a fringe top 25, top 30-ish team this year that should make the tournament, maybe as a 6 or a 7 seed, win a game probably, and try to be kind of around a 32 Sweet 16 team. And when you look at it just through the vacuum of this year, you can say, yeah, that's probably a successful year. But when you look at it, it's okay, it's year 4, and around a 32 is a successful season, it gets a little bit more iffy on that front. So this is a big year for Archie, because if he can make the tournament, obviously, win a game or 2 in the tournament, if they make a Sweet 16, that's huge. I think that would be absolute. He's
reached Tom Crean if he does that.
Yes. I mean, Tom Crean won a Big Ten title in his 5th season. Yes, 2. Yes. Yeah. In his 5th season. His 4th season was really the coming out party for him. Mm-hmm. That's when they beat Kentucky on the Watford shot. They upset Ohio State, who's number 2. He had a lot
less talent in his first 3 seasons, though.
See, that's the point I'm making, though.
Yeah.
Though, he had much more of a rebuild than Archie did, yet by year 4, he had a team that was a 4 seed and was a top 15 team in the country. Archie, year 4, not working on the same type of curve that Green had, will be a big year to see, kind of just for a comparison sake between Archie and Crean. I'm not saying that like you shouldn't have fired Crean and Tom Crean should still be the coach, because there were issues there, even though 2 Big Ten titles in 4 years, there's always that. But it's going to be very interesting. This is a big year for Archie. He has something to prove, and this is the group that he can prove it with. And if he does, then you can kind of feel more comfortable with him moving forward. But if he doesn't, then that raises the questions like we saw with the Romeo and Jawan team that didn't make the tournament of, okay, maybe this isn't the guy, and you probably don't fire him considering all the financial stuff everyone's going through right now, but it does kind of turn it up on the hot seat a little bit.
Before we let you go, I have to ask you 2 things. We'll get to horse racing. I promised you that I would ask you a horse racing question. But you covered a lot of IU events. What are some of the memorable moments that stand out to you?
The Big Ten tournament, for its obvious reasons, the game at Nebraska football this past year, which as weird as it is to say, because Nebraska was a 5-7 football team, that's the biggest program win IU's football's had probably since the Austin Star game to beat Purdue back in 2007. And to be there and to be able to witness it was really, really awesome. And plus, that Nebraska environment, I mean, I've been lucky to where I've been to games at Alabama, LSU, Notre Dame, Michigan, and I would put Nebraska's football environment and atmosphere up against and over any of them. I mean, for a 5-7 Nebraska team and an IU football team, they were 6-2 that, still isn't going to draw a big name. To have 90,000 people there going absolutely berserk the entire game, I think, damn, what would have happened if that team was actually good?
Mm-hmm.
Good. So that was really cool. I would say being able to call both or be on color for both I'm blanking on the name of it, the event with IU, Butler, Crossroads Classics. Yeah. Yeah. For the Rob Finney shot a couple years ago. And then for Armand Franklin to kind of save the day last year were both really cool. I've been lucky. I've been fortunate. I did play-by-play my sophomore year of IU Minnesota, and Justin Smith hits a 3 of all things with a minute left to give IU a win in Archie's first year. Of course, that was before that Minnesota team collapsed, so we thought it was a big win at the time. So that was a lot of fun. But the Gator Bowl for sure. Also, there's a lot. I could go on forever. I'm gonna save you guys a little bit before I ramble too much.
Well, what's funny about that Nebraska game is I completely agree with you. I've put that at the top of my list. It is a program-changing win. And then you say the Bard Starr kick. And I think, what happened in between there? And, they beat a ranked Missouri team on the road that goes completely unnoticed because they never really did anything with it.
Well, I mean that's a team that had so much talent with Nate Sudfeld, Tevin Coleman, Cody Latimer. If Sudfeld doesn't injure his arm, they probably, have a pretty good season. Yeah. Of course, I say that, but then they also lost to Bowling Green that season also with a healthy Sudfeld. So that was the pre-Tom Allen IU defense for sure.
All right, horse racing. You've got the Kentucky Derby coming up. Give me a little insight into what it's going to be like in September, what it's going to be like with 50% capacity. I mean, what are your expectations for the upcoming race?
First of all, thank you to the Indy 500 at Indianapolis Motor Speedway for taking any heat that Churchill Downs would have had for having people allowed to be in the infield, which may be the dumbest thing I've ever heard of in this case. I understand you can kind of social distance it in the grandstand. I mean, Churchill Downs at full capacity for the Derby gets about 170,000 people. You could split that in half with the grandstand, get like maybe 50, 60,000 people in there. That makes sense. But to put 20 to 24,000 in the infield, which usually holds about 100,000, so it's really only a fifth of that. But you understand the type of guy that is in the Kentucky Derby infield. It is the same type of guy that is at Kilroy's at 1:30 a.m. on a Saturday. He's the frat dude that doesn't really care about the betterment of others. He's not going to be wearing a mask. He's not going to social distance, and it's going to be, you know how Kilroy's is on a Saturday night. That's what the infield's like at the Kentucky Derby, which is awesome on a normal year. I would highly recommend it, but for a year like this, maybe that's not the best idea. We'll see what actually happens on that front. But as far as the actual race and the race week goes, that's going to be a crazy week in Louisville because they have moved 2 football games to accommodate the Kentucky Derby. They moved the Louisville football game. They open against NC State they were supposed to open on the Thursday of Derby week. That's called Derby though. Churchill Downs normally gets like 40, 50,000 people just for that. So they moved that game to Wednesday to try to accommodate for the fans on that standpoint. Then Kentucky moved their game from Saturday to Thursday so that it wouldn't be on Derby Day, which is probably a smart thing. You don't want to split up the audience for sure. But as far as the race goes, it's an interesting field this year because Tiz the Law won the Belmont, and he's going to be the odds-on heavy favorite for the Derby unless something weird happens in the next few months, because the other 3 top choices for the Derby, if it were to have run on May 2nd when it was supposed to, or even, a month later on June 2nd, Nadal, Charlatan, who are both Bob Baffert horses, who's by far the biggest name in horse racing, and Maxfield are all out. They all got hurt. They're all done for the Triple Crown. So it's really kind of opened up to where it's Tiz the Law and then everyone else. However, that's extremely hard to just ticket him and say he's going to win the Derby. There's no question about it because it's a 20-horse field. It's bigger than any other race in North America, and random stuff happens that doesn't happen in any other horse race. And it sounds cliche, but in the Derby, the best horse doesn't always win. It's kind of like the NCAA tournament in basketball. It can be a bit of a crapshoot sometimes. It's just the Law is going to be a heavy, heavy, heavy favorite. You probably won't get plus money on him on Derby Day, but there are other horses. Gamine, a filly, which is a girl horse, won the Acorn Stakes on Belmont Day last week. It's a Bob Baffert trained horse. It had the highest speed figure of any 3-year-old male or female of the calendar year. And it wasn't just higher, it was 10 points higher, which is really significant in horse racing. So if Baffert decides to run her in the Derby, then that can make things a lot more interesting. But other than that, it's kind of like the old Tiger Woods days when he was dominating the PGA Tour. It's going to be Tiz the Law or the field. So it's a different Derby for sure from that standpoint, other than the date being different.
Well,
Man,
Jack,
I wish you could have you on forever.
I know. It is always amazing to get to talk to you. Congratulations on the new gig. Hopefully you'll get to work a little bit more. We'll have some sport here pretty soon. But thanks for coming on, man. Stay safe, stay healthy.
Thanks, guys. Always appreciate it. Take care.
Talk to you later, Jack. That was Jack Grossman, radio personality producer in Louisville, but more importantly, one of our good friends from Indiana University. Tomorrow, we could have him talk forever, but he's talked us all the way to our noon spot here. So I guess for the folks at home, we'll do a quick wrap up. Thanks to you for coming on and co-hosting today and for bringing Mike on. That was fantastic. Great insight with Mike. Reminder, you can catch all of our previous 18 episodes. We just had Bob Kravitz and Mike Miller on Monday. Great conversations with both of them. Bob Kravitz told a great story about yelling at Peyton Manning and a naked Bob Knight sitting on a chair with him. So definitely that sounded wrong. Sitting in a chair in the room with him. But definitely go check out those stories from Bob on Monday's episode. You could catch them wherever you listen to podcasts, or you can watch them on the IU Sports Media YouTube page. Well, it's a beautiful day. I'm going to go play golf tomorrow. I hope you have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you soon here on Unpaid Interns.
Enjoy the day. Thanks, Austin, and thank you to our guests, Mike and Jack. Really appreciate it.
Have a great week, everyone. We'll see you on Friday.